recorded at the National Health Association Conference in Miami Beach, Florida.
Howard Lyman, we're happy to have you at the Natural Health Association. I understand you spoke last year. Is this your second conference?
Yeah, it's my second conference, and the first one I found to be just magnificent. I came, and the people were so engaging, the conversations, and what I learned. I would have to say that was probably one of the best uses of my time that I've ever had in my life. I would highly recommend it to anyone. It will shake you to your foundation and make you think about a better, healthier life.
Could you comment on the quality of the speakers at the conference?
Well, you know, when you take somebody like Dr. Alan Goldhammer, just outstanding, Dr. Lyle, Dr. Sabatino, I mean, you look at these people, these are world-class speakers on the top of their profession. You know, Dr. T. Colin Campbell was here last year, I believe one of the greatest researchers alive on the planet. These are the kind of people that make coming here worthwhile and make you think, I should have been here a long time ago.
Would you tell us a little bit about your book and the title of your book?
Well, I'm a fourth generation farmer, rancher, feedlot operator, and so I wrote a book, and the book is called Mad Cowboy, the cattle rancher who won't eat meat. You know, 45 years of my life I spent in production agriculture, and it was not until I was paralyzed from the waist down that I really focused on the fact that I was part of the problem and not the solution. They were telling me that I had a tumor on my spinal cord, and if the tumor was on the inside of the cord, I had less than one chance in a million I would ever walk again. That really gets your attention. And when I focused on that, I realized that the reason I became a farmer is because I love birds and trees and living soil. I was buying hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of chemicals. I was killing the birds, killing the trees, turning the soil into something like asbestos. I realized at that time I was part of the problem and not part of the solution. When I wrote the book, Mad Cowboy, I wrote it about the transformation of somebody from production agriculture to somebody now that goes around the world and talks to people about our methods of producing food today on the planet Earth, for the most part, are absolutely, totally non-sustainable. It's about where I've been and where I think we need to go from a personal perspective.
Howard, there was some controversy over Oprah Winfrey show. I read about it in the paper. Could you elaborate a little bit more on what happened?
Well, in 1990, I first started talking to the people in North America about a disease that was called bovine spongiform encephalopathy. Now, on my farm in Montana, I had a disease in my cattle, and it was called TEM, thrombosis and meningitis. And it was a virus that attacked the brain, and there was very high temperature in the brain and basically made the animal brain dead. They would stand there perfectly healthy, but didn't know enough to eat or drink. I lost 10% of my herd. Financially, it was devastating. In 1990, I heard about a disease in England much like that. It was called mad cow disease. I went to the Library of Congress and I looked it up, and they were talking about bovine spongiform encephalopathy as a slow-growing virus or bacteria, but nothing to worry about because it couldn't be transferred from humans, from cattle to humans. But then in England, they found that this disease was much different than what we thought. It would survive 1100 degrees centigrade, had no RNA, no DNA. We never have known a virus or a bacteria like that. And so they gave it a new name and they called it a prion, an abnormal protein. Well, when I heard about that and found that from the time that you were infected until the time that you died, and if you were infected, it was 100% fatal, I started talking to people around North America that we should be making some changes so that we would not make the same mistakes they made in England. Remember, first case was found in England in the cattle herd in 1986. By 1990, it was an epidemic. It got to the point where there were over 1,000 cows a week coming down with the disease. But when I started talking to people about it, they thought I was the one that had holes in my brain because nobody had ever heard of it. Well, in 1996, the Minister of Health in England stood in front of Parliament and said, we no longer can assure the English people that this disease cannot be transferred from cows to humans. Cattlemen said that was the exploding powder keg heard around the world. Well, Oprah Winfrey heard about it. I was in England at that time. I did 90 press conferences in 9 days. And when I came back, Oprah called me and said, we want to do a show that's called Dangerous Food. Could it happen here? Well, you know, being in England, doing 90 press conferences in 9 days, being on radio and television in 200 countries, you know, I was a celebrity. When she called, you know, did I jump at the fact of going out and appearing on a show in front of 20 million people? Absolutely not. I waited 4 or 5 seconds before I agreed. She sent me a ticket. I went to Chicago. I appeared on the show, and I talked to Oprah Winfrey about the potential of it happening here. Now, she started the show with a straightforward question. She said, pointing at me, here's a man who believes we could have a disease within 10 years that would make AIDS look like the common cold. And I said, absolutely. Oprah said, that's a strong statement. I said, Oprah, we have 100,000 cows a year that are fine at night, dead in the morning. We round them up, grind them up, turn them into feed, and feed them back to other cows. We take roadkill, deer, elk, possum, raccoon, scrape them up off on the road, grind them up, turn them into feed, and feed them to the cattle. We take euthanized pets, dogs and cats, full of the chemicals that were used to kill them. City of Los Angeles alone, 200 tons of dogs and cats a month, ground up into feed, fed back to our pets or our food animals. Now, Oprah, she was quite shocked at this. She turned to the man from the National Cattlemen's Beef Association, Dr. Gary Weber, and she said, Dr. Weber, are we feeding cows to cows? I'll never forget what he had to say. He said, you know, a limited amount of that is going on. And then Oprah said, that just stops me cold. I will never again eat a burger. Now, she didn't say to 20 million people, you shouldn't eat a burger. She didn't say the meat is infected. She just said, that stops me cold. I will never again eat a burger. On that show, I called for the fact that we should not feed cows to cows, that I thought that it would take us down the same path that they went in England. All Oprah said is that she wouldn't eat a burger. Well, when the show was over, we were taping it. I walked up to Oprah and I said, hey, Oprah, give me 10 minutes. I'll get you off a chicken. And Oprah said, only one animal a day. You know, I didn't pay much attention to that. I knew that 13 states had a thing called a food disparagement law. Now, a food disparagement law says you cannot say something you know to be false about a perishable commodity. I didn't say anything on that show that I knew to be false. Every word I said on that show, I believed to be true. So I didn't pay much attention to that. I went about my business, and a few weeks later, a national news magazine called me up and said, do you realize you're being sued along with Oprah Winfrey and Harpo Production by a group of Texas cattlemen? I said, no. I said, can I put you on hold? I put them on hold. I raced into my library. I inventoried my vegetarian cookbooks. I knew those cattlemen wanted those vegetarian cookbooks bad. I went back and said, I can't talk to you now. I got to put in a call to Oprah. I called Oprah and left a message. I said, hey, Oprah, we lose this suit. I'm throwing in my vegetarian cookbooks. You got to put up the money. Well, you know, I didn't think that there was anything to this suit. The United States Department of Agriculture and the Food and Drug Administration, they did exactly what I called for. They passed regulations banning feeding cows to cows. They actually gave the Nobel Prize to the man that came up with the theory of the prions, the abnormal protein. I thought, sure, we would go to Amarillo, Texas. The judge, a 72-year-old lady, a tough old heifer, I thought, sure, she'd pick up the hammer, slap it down, and say, case dismissed. But boy, was I surprised. 25% of all the cattle fed in North America come from Amarillo, Texas. You know, they're 120 feedlots averaging 55,000 head of cattle surround Amarillo, Texas. The largest employer, a slaughterhouse, killing cattle. Bumper stickers all over town that said the only mad cow in Texas is named Oprah. I knew we were in trouble. And I will tell you, we were in that courtroom for 6 weeks in front of a jury that was absolutely steeped in the cattle culture. And in 6 weeks, we won a unanimous verdict that they said that Oprah, Harpo Production, and myself were not liable. Now, the cattlemen wouldn't give up. They appealed it, took it to the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals for 1 year. This case was in front of the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, and they came back with a unanimous verdict and said, in their opinion, every word I said on that show was true, and the truth is not actionable. Now, the cattlemen asked for a rehearing. The judge turned it down. Now, those cattlemen had the option of going to the Supreme Court. They didn't. So now there's a federal rule that said if you sue somebody and you lose, you are responsible for reasonable attorney fees. Now, I have to tell you, in this case, there was no such thing as reasonable attorney fees. We have applied to the judge to get paid what we have spent. It's in front of her right now. But at the same time, on the last day of the statute of limitations, 160 other cattlemen filed exactly the same cause of action in state court 40 miles up the road in Dumas, Texas. Now, their attorney came on the courthouse steps and said, we're suing him here because this judge is up for re-election every 4 years. We don't think he'll be intimidated by the celebrity status of the defendants. I'm not from Texas. I have the right to go from state court to federal court. We have done that. The cattlemen have appealed it. It's sitting there right now. For over 4 years, we've been paying attorneys who are going out and telling the truth for the American people. I will tell you right now, I hope there's some justice out there somewhere.
I just had asked, and the case is not over.
No, the case is not over, but the important thing, I think, to look here is that had that show gone on, only 20 million people would have seen it, and shortly they would have forgot all about it. But by the cattlemen suing us, all of a sudden, hundreds of millions of people around the globe looked at it, and they were looking at it and saying, wait a minute, you mean to say they're grounding up dogs and cats and feeding them back to cows? Euthanized pets are going back and they're using it in our food, that we're scraping up roadkill? I think that the cattlemen did us the greatest favor in the world because they told the people exactly what was going into their food that is out there. And it gives a whole new meaning to the fact that the fork is the most dangerous weapon in the arsenal of the Homo sapiens.
And we need those truths. Howard, how was your health affected through this turmoil?
Well, it was high stress. But remember back, if we go back before I started changing my diet, I was a 300-pound football player. I never found an animal product I wouldn't stuff down my throat because I wanted to go out on the field and knock the other guy down. I needed my protein, I needed my iron. And when I quit playing football, I kept eating the same way, and I got well over 300 pounds. My blood pressure was sky high. My cholesterol was over 300. I'd sit down and have lunch, and my nose would bleed. Now, I'm from Montana. Montana, you'd rather be caught riding a stolen horse than admitting to somebody that you were a vegetarian. But, I knew if I didn't change my diet, I wasn't going to live very long. And so I became the world's worst vegetarian, lettuce and dairy products. 1 year, that was my diet. Lost some weight. My blood pressure went down slightly. My cholesterol went down slightly. And I thought, if I can do that, being the world's worst vegetarian, just think what I could do if I was a vegan. I became a vegan. I lost 130 pounds. My blood pressure went from sky high to normal. My cholesterol from 300 to 135. I thought I saved my life by changing my diet. Had I not changed my diet before I ended up in that courtroom for 6 weeks under the stress that was there, can you imagine what it's like when you're being sued for $180 million and every word that is there, your future of you, your family, is hanging on it? Now, that stress, I was able to handle that with my diet. But I will tell you, even being a vegan, my diet was not near as good as what I've learned since then it should be. And so we keep climbing the mountain, we keep doing better, but we can always do a little better. We can end up going from a carnivore to a vegetarian to a vegan, from a vegan to a raw fooder, and start eating live foods, understand the actual hygiene about our diets. And so I believe that for me, having changed my diet, it allowed me to handle the stress that was there. But I would have much rather done that with the diet I have today than the diet that I had back in 1980, or 1998. So we all can do better. This is a learning experience, and I would hope that every viewer that's out there right now understands we all can do better tomorrow than what we did today.
You mentioned Dr. Alan Goldhammer earlier. I understand you fasted for a period of time. Could you tell us about that?
Yeah, this was an interesting thing, When I first heard about fasting, I thought, whew, boy, what a bunch of kooks are out there right now. Can you imagine just going out and spending days doing nothing than drinking water, and that's supposed to be healthy? And when I first heard Dr. Alan Goldhammer speak, I thought, this guy is off of the wall. But I went out and got some books, and I started reading about it, and I saw that there were a great deal of facts that supported this. And I thought, well, it's one thing about somebody else writing, and that's the whole thing. I wonder what it would be like for me. Now, remember, on my farm, I was buying hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of chemicals. My brother died of Hodgkin's disease. It wasn't until years later that I found from T. Colin Campbell that Hodgkin's disease could be caused by dioxin. We were buying thousands and thousands of gallons of 2,4,5-T, which was called in Vietnam Agent Orange, which had dioxin in it. And I thought, maybe I should go and take a look at doing some fasting, see about detoxifying my body from all of the chemicals that were there. But I have to tell you, I was really hesitant about this. Now, this was pretty far out for an old Montana farm boy. Well, I went to Pengrove, California. My wife and I, we went to Dr. Alan Goldhammer's clinic, the Center for Conservative Therapy, hesitant at best, and went and did a 10-day water fast. Finest thing I ever did for myself. I found it to be not only the best physical thing that I've done, but one of the most phenomenal spiritual events that I've ever done. Both my wife and I went 10 days, water only. I could not recommend anything more highly for a person that is in need of a water fast. Now, a lot of folks I know, they talk about, the juice fast, or they're talking about a meat-only fast or whatever. A water fast really gets you in touch with yourself, and especially when you do it in a clinic where the education goes with it, where you end up with the medical advice overseeing what you do. It was a phenomenal experience. I could not recommend it too highly for somebody that is in need of it, but I would never recommend somebody to do it without supervision.
Dr. Herbert Shelton was one of the founders of what was called the American Natural Hygiene Society, and now its name is the National Health Association. Have you read any books by Herbert M. Shelton?
Yeah, I have, and the interesting thing, I happen to be quite a reader. I love to read. I try to read a book a day. What I try to do is I try to reach out on those people that stimulate me to thinking. Dr. Shelton was a phenomenal person, well ahead of his time. And what happens for the people that are ahead of their time, they end up with a good deal of abuse. But it's an amazing thing as we go along. Here at the conference today, Dr. Goldhammer showed the study that he did with people with fasting and lowering chronically high blood pressure. A phenomenal piece of work. This is right in line with what Dr. Shelton was talking about years and years ago. And so I would recommend that people go to the library, go to the bookstore, get some of those things that you look at and you say, oh, well, I don't know about that. It is not what we know that gets us in trouble. It's what we know that isn't so. And some good reading, some study, and checking the footnotes and the facts are some of the best things that we could do.